Parte 1. Frame by frame. My father passed away in April. Heart attack. Sudden. One of those phone calls that doesn't feel real at first. I flew home to Ohio the next day. My brother Paul and I spent a week cleaning out the house, sorting boxes, arguing over what to keep, what to donate, what to pretend we never saw. On the fourth day, while going through the attic, we found the reels. Old Super 8 film, dozens of them. Most were unlabeled or just marked in faded ink. Summer '89, Disney trip, backyard. We brought them downstairs, laid them across the dining table. Paul picked one up, squinted. Think any of these are still playable? I shrugged. Only one way to find out. That night, I called a local film guy. He ran a small shop that digitized old media. Tapes, reels, slides, all that stuff. Said he could convert them to digital and have them back within a week. I dropped off the box the next morning. When I told him they were from the '80s, he smiled. "That's the good stuff," he said. "Families back then knew how to record everything." A week later, he emailed me a link to the files. I waited until Paul and I were both home, then hooked the laptop to the TV. We sat on the old couch with beers and a bowl of popcorn, like we were 12 again. The first video started, summer of 1989. Our backyard in Akron. Everything sun-drenched and shaky. Mom in jean shorts and a perm, chasing Paul with a hose. Dad holding the camera, laughing. Me, age 5, digging a hole in the garden like I was searching for treasure. Everything felt soft, like we were watching ghosts on vacation. Halfway through the video, Paul leaned forward. "Wait, go back a second." I rewound 10 seconds, paused. He pointed. "There, by the shed. See that?" I squinted. In the far corner of the frame, mostly shadowed by trees, stood a woman. Not Mom, not Grandma, not a neighbor I recognized. She was just standing there, half turned toward the camera, wearing a long, pale dress, too formal for summer. And her face, it was hard to see. Not blurry, just indistinct. Like the film couldn't quite hold her details. Paul leaned in. "Who the hell is that?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. We watched another video, this one labeled Cedar Point. Roller coasters, cotton candy, a Ferris wheel. At one point, the camera pans toward the boardwalk. There she is again. Farther away this time, walking between vendors. Same dress, same posture, same turned face. No one in the crowd reacts. No one looks at her. Not even us. We checked 5 more videos that night, and she was in all of them. Always in the background, never interacting, just watching. Sometimes from behind trees, sometimes sitting on a bench. Once, from inside the house, behind a window. I emailed the film guy, asked if he'd noticed her. He replied 2 hours later. "Yes, I wasn't sure if I should say anything. Thought maybe it was a relative. But there's something odd. She never blinks. Frame by frame, her eyes stay open. Every time." Paul wanted to stop watching, said it felt wrong. I didn't. I felt drawn to her, compelled. There was something familiar about her silhouette. The way she stood, the way she tilted her head, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. On the last reel, something changed. It was labeled only with a single letter, E. We played it. This one was indoors. Christmas, 1991. Our living room. Tinsel. Wrapping paper. Me in dinosaur pajamas. Paul playing with a toy truck. Dad filming, his voice humming a carol off-key. Then a cut, abrupt to black. then static, then a frame of the woman, close this time, standing in the center of the room, alone, no one else in the frame, just her, staring at the camera, expressionless, still. The shot held for 7 seconds. Then another cut. Back to Christmas morning. Back to toys and candy and laughter. Paul hit pause. Did you edit these? No. Did Dad? I don't think so. We sat in silence, the TV still frozen on my 5-year-old face. And in the corner of the frame, just behind me, the woman, smiling. To be continued in part 2, parte dos. Her smile wasn't in the original. After we saw the smile, Paul shut the laptop, hard, like slamming the lid would make it disappear. He stood, muttered something about needing air, and left the house. I stayed, opened the file again, scrolled to the Christmas footage, paused on the woman's face. It was clearer this time. Not sharp, never sharp, but defined enough to see that the smile didn't match her eyes. Her lips curled upward just slightly, but her eyes were flat, unmoved, like the expression had been applied, not felt. I zoomed in. Her pupils weren't black. They were gray, cloudy, like cataracts, or dusted over glass. She was staring directly at the camera, at me. The next day, Paul didn't want to talk about it, said it was just a glitch, an old film artifact. We'd watched too many back-to-back. I didn't argue. I just said, okay, then waited until he left to meet his friend for dinner and watched the rest by myself. I went through every clip we'd skipped, looking for her, and I found her in every single one. Not always obvious, sometimes just a piece of her, the edge of the dress, a blurred hand, a face barely framed in a window reflection. But she was there. Once, I caught her behind the couch, visible only in the glass of the TV screen. Another time, she was in the woods behind our house, so faint she looked like smoke. But what really shook me was the footage from the basement. My dad had filmed Paul and me playing ping pong. I must have been 6 or 7. Paul cheated constantly. You could hear Dad laughing in the background. I remembered that day. I remembered that exact game. And I remembered we were alone. But on the tape, at the very edge of the frame, there was a door, one I didn't recognize. It stood half open, and from the crack, a face peeked through. Not the whole thing, just the top half. Eyes wide, unblinking, watching us play. The door wasn't part of our basement. We didn't have one there. I paused the video, rewound, stepped frame by frame. The door blinked out between 2 cuts, as if it had never existed. But for those 3 seconds, it had. And so had she. I called the film guy, asked if he'd tampered with anything. He swore he hadn't. Said if anything, he was considering giving me a refund. When I asked why, he said, because whatever's in those tapes didn't want to be seen until now. He asked if he could run a deeper analysis, infrared scan, metadata breakdown. I said yes, anything to make sense of this. He said it would take a few days. That night, I had a dream. I was 5 again, digging in the backyard. Same plastic shovel, same overturned dirt. But this time, the soil didn't feel like soil. It felt soft, like fabric. And when I dug deep enough, I found a hand, cold, gray, reaching up. I dropped the shovel, tried to scream, but the hand wasn't grabbing me. It was pointing toward the shed, where the woman stood in the shadows, holding a reel of film, burning. I woke up in the attic. Don't remember going there. Don't remember climbing the stairs. But I was barefoot, and the box of reels, it was open. Tapes scattered around me. One reel, the one marked E, sat beside me unspooled, and written across the flooring dust, "You saw me smile." To be continued in part 3. Parte 3. She's not just watching anymore. The attic was silent. No wind, no creaks, no sound at all. I stood slowly, my feet freezing against the wooden boards, looked down at the dust. The message was still there. Not smeared, not brushed. Clear, precise. You saw me smile. And below it, barely visible, another word began to form. Like someone had just started writing, then stopped. Rem. I knelt, touched it. The dust stuck to my skin, damp. Not with water, but something thicker, like condensation or breath. I brought the box of reels back downstairs, checked the locks, windows, basement door. Everything was secure. Paul still wasn't home. I wanted to call him, tell him everything, but I knew what he'd say, that I was unraveling. Dad's death messed with my head. That old tapes mess with memory. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the oldest reel, one we hadn't watched, labeled Mom Pre-Wedding. No year. I played it on the laptop. It opened with Mom sitting on a bench by the lake, smiling shyly at the camera. Young, maybe 20. Then Dad stepped into frame, said something. The audio was faint, crackling, but I heard it. You still want this, even with her around? Mom didn't answer. She just glanced off camera, then nodded once. I rewound, turned up the audio, listened again. Wow, even with her around? Her, the woman? I skipped ahead, frame by frame, stopped. There she was, in the background, sitting on a rock by the water. Same dress, hair loose this time, barefoot, looking directly at my mother, and smiling. I called the film guy again. No answer. Left a voicemail. Told him to call me ASAP. Told him something was wrong with the footage. Not damaged. Wrong. I didn't say what I meant. Didn't say, I think she's in our lives, not just our tapes. Because part of me knew he wouldn't be able to help. Not anymore. That night, I woke up at 2:47 a.m. No sound, just pressure in the room, in my chest. Like the air had thickened. I sat up, heard the softest creak outside my bedroom door. Then silence. I reached for my phone, opened the camera app, turned it to the hallway. Pitch black. I switched to photo mode and snapped a pic. Flash on, nothing visible to the eye. But when I checked the image, she was there, standing at the end of the hall. Bare feet, wet hair, dress stained with something dark. And her eyes, they weren't cloudy anymore. They were empty. I bolted out of the room, fell down the stairs, cut my elbow on the banister, ran outside barefoot into the cold, waited in the driveway until morning. Paul found me at 7 a.m., shaking. I told him everything. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you remember that night at Cedar Point?" "What night?" "When we both got lost." I stared at him. "We didn't get lost." "Yeah," he said, "we did. We were gone for almost 2 hours. Mom called security. You don't remember?" I didn't. Not a second. Paul looked pale, shaken. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo I'd never seen. Taken that same day, a blurry shot of me and Paul eating ice cream by the arcade. In the background, the woman, closer this time, looking straight at the lens, right hand raised, fingers spread wide, and in her palm, my name, written in dirt, to be continued in Part 4. Parte 4, The Lost Hours. The photo haunted me, my name, Liam, written in dirt across the woman's palm. The date stamped on the photo matched the Cedar Point footage. August 12th, 1991. All remembered the date because it was the first time Mom ever cried in public. He said we disappeared after lunch. 1 minute we were buying lemonade, the next, gone. They found us almost 2 hours later, sitting quietly behind a storage shed near the kiddie rides. Neither of us spoke. No bruises, no injuries, just silence. And I don't remember any of it. That night, we watched the Cedar Point tape again. This time, frame by frame, analyzing the crowd, faces, shadows, movement. At one point, the camera turns to film the fountain in the center of the park. And just before the frame cuts, there's a flicker. Not a visual flicker, a jump, like a skipped beat. We rewound, slowed it down, watched carefully. There it was, 1 missing second. The people in the background shift position instantly. Someone holding a balloon suddenly isn't. A man walking is now turned around. And the woman? She's not there. But in the next frame, she is. Closer than ever. Standing just behind Dad. So close, her face reflects in the lens. And this time, she's whispering something. No audio, but we can see her mouth move. 1 word, 3 syllables over and over. We played the footage on loop, paused it, zoomed. Paul tried to read her lips, tried saying it aloud, mouthing it. Then his face went pale. He hit pause, turned to me, whispered, "It's my name." I shook my head. No way. That's not what I see. He asked what I thought she said. I said, "Mine." Then we stared at the paused frame, at her lips, mid-syllable. Realizing we each saw something different. Our own names, whispered back to us from a memory we don't own. The next day, we visited the film guy's shop. It was closed, sign on the door, temporarily out of business. Paper over the windows, phone line dead. We walked around the side, back door slightly ajar. Inside, dark, dusty, and the shelves empty. Everywhere, blank tape reels, no labels, no equipment, nothing, except a single sticky note taped to the counter. "She's in more than just yours." We went home in silence. Paul said he was done. Done watching, done digging. Said whatever this was, it had always been there, and now it knew we were looking. That night, I dreamed I was inside the film. Not watching it, inside it. Like I was standing behind the lens, behind my father, filming my own childhood. And the woman stood beside me, holding the camera, guiding my hand, whispering, "Frame by frame, you'll remember." When I woke up, my phone was open to the gallery. Every photo deleted, except one, a new one, a still frame. Me and Paula's kids sitting on the couch, watching something, staring ahead, mouths open, eyes unfocused, and behind us, just over the couch, the woman, both hands on our shoulders, no smile this time, just staring at the camera, and in the corner of the image, The timestamp, 3:14 a.m., today's date, to be continued in part 5. Parte 5, playback. I didn't tell Paul about the photo. Not yet. He'd already said he was done. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let it go too. But I couldn't. That image of the woman's hands on our shoulders, it felt too real, too now. The still frame didn't look like it had been taken from the past. It looked like a shot from a live camera, as if it had just happened, as if it was still happening. I checked the attic again, half hoping the box of reels would be gone, burned, missing, stolen. But it was still there. Only now, one of the reels was unspooled across the floor, the one labeled Paul Bike. I gathered it up, careful not to tear the strip, loaded it into the projector, turned off the lights, watched. It was footage of Paul at maybe age 8, riding his bike in circles on the driveway. Dad filming, Mom clapping, a summer afternoon. But I noticed it immediately. The sky was wrong, not color-wise, texture. It didn't move. No clouds, no flicker, like someone had painted a perfect sky and never updated it. As Paul biked, the edges of the frame distorted, wavered. And at one point, when he turned the corner, the woman appeared, standing near the mailbox, head tilted, watching him. Paul rode past, didn't flinch, didn't see her, but she turned her head to follow him, slow, patient. I paused the video. Her gaze shifted. Now she was looking straight at the camera, at me. I went frame by frame. In one, her mouth opened, wide, too wide, and something fell out. I couldn't make it out clearly. Film grain is tricky that way. But it looked like paper or fabric falling from her lips. The next frame, she was gone. I rewound again, played it forward, watched as the object fell, paused, zoomed, and froze. It wasn't paper. It was a photograph, tiny, black and white, face down. But I knew it instinctively. It was me. I shut off the projector, backed away, heart pounding. Then I heard it, a soft sound, familiar, from the hallway, from the coat closet. A click, then the slow creak of a door opening. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera app, didn't speak, didn't move, just aimed it toward the hall, tapped record, stood frozen, watching, until the hallway filled with static. Not real static, visual. In the video, the pixels broke, glitched, and in a single frame, she appeared, inches from the lens, mouth closed, eyes dark, and for the first time, she blinked. I dropped the phone, ran into the hall. The closet was empty, nothing there except for a single film reel on the floor. This one wasn't labeled, but someone had etched a message into the plastic with a penknife or key. Recording still in progress. To be continued in part 6. Parte 6. Recording still in progress. The reel sat in my palm like it was warm, not just in temperature, in presence. Like it had been waiting for me. I carried it downstairs, heart hammering, breath caught in my throat, loaded it into the projector with trembling hands. Didn't label it, didn't prep, just press play and watched. The screen flickered, then lit up with our backyard, but not then, now. Same dead grass, same rusted grill, same wind chime Mom hung in 2002. This was now. I checked the timestamp embedded in the corner. It read, live. I stared, unblinking. Then the camera panned, moved upward toward the attic window where I was standing, where I shouldn't be visible. And in the next frame, I saw myself staring down from the attic window, On-screen me slowly raised a hand, waved, then smiled. I recoiled. The screen blacked out, then flickered again. A new scene. Inside the house. Kitchen. The camera moved slowly, almost reverently, past the sink, past the hallway, toward the living room, toward Paul. He was asleep on the couch, face turned away, blanket half dragged onto the floor. The camera paused, then zoomed in slightly. A whisper filled the speakers, soft, gravelly, unmistakable. He doesn't remember the hour, but she does. I pressed stop. The projector didn't respond. I unplugged it. Still ran. I yanked the reel. It slowed, stopped. But the whisper continued, now in the room. Not from the machine. You watched me watching you. I turned. She was standing in the doorway. Not in film, not on screen. In my house, in my hallway. Same dress, same empty eyes, but her mouth wasn't smiling anymore. It was twitching, like something trying to learn how to smile. She took a step forward, and the projector started spinning again, on its own. The image on the screen returned. Paul, still sleeping. But now behind him, the woman, in the same position she stood in now, only the background behind her was different. It was the attic. From my perspective, I realized what I was watching. It wasn't just a loop. It was live. A crossfeed. 2 angles. 1 reality. Both recording. I ran downstairs, shook Paul awake. He jumped, confused, alarmed, tried to ask what was happening. I didn't answer, just dragged him upstairs, pointed to the projector. The screen was blank. Reels spinning. Silent. Nothing playing. No proof. Paul looked at me, eyes wide. You're scaring me, Liam. I sat down, back to the wall, palms shaking. And I said the only thing that made sense. She's not in the films. She is the films. He didn't understand, didn't want to. He left again, back to his apartment, said he needed space. I didn't stop him. I stayed, alone. At 3:14 a.m., the projector turned itself back on, and this time, the screen showed my bedroom. From behind the mirror, a figure in the bed, me, eyes closed, and in the reflection, the woman, standing over me, head tilted, mouth open, and this time she spoke, clearly. Frame by frame, you belong here now. To be continued in part 7, parte 7, frame by frame. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed in grain. That's what I started calling it, the grain. Like the texture of the old film had seeped into my head. My dreams had jump cuts now, hard edits, static transitions. People moved with that jittery, imperfect flow of 16mm film. Stuttered smiles, blinkless stares, and always in the background, her. Not approaching, not speaking. Just framed, perfectly, as if someone was behind the camera, directing her. I smashed the projector, used a hammer, made sure it shattered completely, burned the reels in the fire pit in the backyard, even the unlabeled ones, watched the plastic melt, heard the reels hiss. The smoke smelled like film and something else, sweet, rotted, like memory curdling. That night, I got an email. No subject, no sender, just a video file. I opened it. Of course I did. It was the footage from earlier, me burning the reels, only from a different angle, a high one, as if someone was filming from the attic. The video lasted 27 seconds. In the final frame, I stepped out of view, and the camera panned to the far end of the attic where the woman sat, alone, smiling, holding the last reel still intact. I slammed the laptop shut, ran to the attic. Nothing. No smoke, no film. But in the far corner, under a broken floorboard, I found something. A photo. Old, curled with age, of my mother, young, teenage maybe, sitting in a chair in what looked like this very attic, and standing behind her, the woman, hands on her shoulders, like the photo of Paul and me. And on the back of the photo, scrawled in pencil, "She told me I'd forget, but I remember you." Initials below, EH. I didn't recognize them. The next day, I drove to the county clerk's office, searched every record I could find, marriage certificates, old census data, deeds. I finally found something, a record from 1956. House transfer document. Previous owner, Eleanor Hastings. Sold the house to a young couple, not my parents, but someone before them. She didn't leave a forwarding address. Her name had no relatives listed, no obituary, no photo. But the note on her file, that stopped me cold. Hastings claims home is still occupied, insists film lady will not allow resale. Witnesses report unusual behavior, recommends psychiatric eval. I left the office, drove home, parked across the street. Watched the attic window. It was dusk. A faint orange glow across the sky. The light in the attic was on, but I hadn't turned it on. I hadn't been home since the fire. Then, movement. A figure, standing, in the window, framed in silhouette, not moving, just watching. I walked up the driveway, opened the front door, dark inside, silent. I went straight to the attic. Each step heavy, air thin. And when I opened the attic door, she was waiting. Not just standing this time, filming. Old camera on a tripod, winding itself, the reel turning. She stepped aside, revealed the viewfinder, and in it, me, staring back, but younger, 6 maybe, holding a plastic shovel, covered in dirt, smiling. And someone else next to me, someone off frame, just a hand visible on my shoulder. The woman reached out, held something toward me, the reel, not burned, not broken, and a whisper filled the room. Finish the scene, to be concluded in part 8. Part 8. The last frame. She stood there, in the attic, holding the reel out to me like it was a gift, or a trap, maybe both. The old projector next to her began to hum, spinning, even without power. The lens flickered with faint light, and I saw myself inside. Not as I was now, but younger, 6 years old, sitting in the grass behind the shed, digging, then pausing, looking up and smiling. Smiling at someone just off camera, someone reaching toward me with something shiny. Frame by frame, the image jittered. The dirt rippled like waves. And in the distance, a voice whispered, "You were never just watching." I stepped forward, took the reel. It was warm. Not hot, warm like skin. like it had been held for a long time. The woman stepped back, nodded once, then vanished. Not suddenly, just between frames. There in one, gone in the next, like she'd never moved, only been edited out. I stared at the projector, still spinning, still glowing. I slid the reel into place, pressed play. The screen lit up. Footage flickered. Me and Paul in the backyard, 1991, summer. The camera pans slowly, almost reverently, toward the garden. And there, buried just beneath the topsoil, something shimmered. A box, metal, labeled memory. Dug with my child hands, lifted the box, opened it. Inside, dozens of tiny photos, not on paper, on film. Each one a moment we forgot. Me at the hospital, Paul's lost birthday, Mom crying in the basement, Dad burning something in the sink. And behind all of them, in every frame, the woman, watching, guiding, framing. Then the footage cut to the attic. Present day. Live. Me, standing. Projector, humming. Camera, rolling. And on the screen, a final message appeared. One line. You're not the last. The reel spun down, stopped. The projector powered off, and the attic was silent again. I left the house the next morning. Paul and I signed the papers that afternoon. Sold it to a couple with a baby on the way. They seemed nice, normal, happy. I didn't tell them about the reels. Didn't warn them about the attic, about the woman, about Eleanor Hastings. I told myself it was done, finished. But I knew better. 1 week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no postage, just a box. Inside, a single reel, unlabeled, and a note. Frame 001, baby's first steps. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I know I will. Because that's what she wants. And once you see her, she becomes the editor. And you're just footage. End of story. ... That's end of story. ... You're just footage. End of story. ...